Here they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you hear the applause?
Yes. I have
we love it.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining tonight. I will start the conversation. Then you can ask if you have a question. Just raise your hand. We'll come to you with a microphone, and just stay in your seat, and we'll come to you and reach. My first question is to Valerie. Valerie, when we were talking a few days ago, you said something that really stuck with me. I asked you, what is this fascination with the sharks? I mean, you're playing with them, you're doing things that nobody else does. And you said something that to you, every animal on Earth, you know, on the surface has a correspondent in the sea. And so it was not difficult for you to penetrate their mentality. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. It took me quite a few years and a lot of diving to start to understand the different fish and understand their habits, their likes, their dislikes. I'm pretty up on it right now, mostly tropical fish. But what I realized about early 70s, actually I can tell you the date, 1970, was that all the fish had different personalities. A school of fish, they all had their own bully, a timid guy, a cheeky guy, all in the one school, just like a herd of, say, deer on land. And I started to give like a tiger shark in the sea and check him against a tiger shark on land, which is actually a tiger. And they're very similar in personality. And I learned from that. I've got a bit of a cough.
Well, Bettina and Sally, can you explain us a little bit how you came to make the film? I think Bettina had worked with Valerie before, and you brought Sally in.
Yeah, so actually the journey with Valerie started when I was very young, when I saw the image of Valerie on the front of the National Geographic in her chainmail with a shark hanging off her arm. And in that moment, she was like a Marvel hero. And I never imagined I'd have the privilege to not only meet her, but work with her 20 years ago and make a 3-part series for the Nat Geo with Valerie and Ron. And then, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, I was sitting in the cinema watching the Jane Goodall film, Jane. And I just thought at that moment, I thought, oh, we've got our own Jane. Like, we've got this incredible woman, and why hasn't a film been made about her and her achievements? We've got this incredible archival footage. And, you know, I was like, you know, astounded. I hadn't thought of it before. And so immediately flew into action, and the story was so rich and powerful. And Sally has an extraordinary reputation for working with, you know, bringing out the layered personalities and stories and working with archives. So Sally came on board, and here we are.
And all I can say is that in the same way that every dive, according to Valerie, is an adventure, every film is an adventure in the making. And I feel like we're still learning things about Valerie's observations and her insights. That means, in a sort of strange way, the film journey is continuing the more time we spend together and discuss all these things.
Valerie, did you and Ron expect that the footage you were filming would become so important from a scientific point of view to basically document marine life and teach us about marine life, and marine life that is not longer there in that, at least in that quantity?
No, we really didn't think that way. Mainly, I guess, because we never, in our wild imagination, had any idea of the horrors that were going to happen in the marine world, around the world. So basically, we were making history. We were documenting a way of life in the ocean that is fast vanishing, and it can never be documented again in your lifetime or even the lifetime of a small child today. It's done. We had no idea it would be so valuable, but these things happen. The fishermen get out there, they start harvesting, over-harvesting. It's all free for the taking. And the human race on land like fish. They dislike sharks. Sad, but true. There's over 300 species of shark. There's only about 6 species that could be potentially dangerous. So, I mean, this is just a small amount compared to the people that are killed on the road in one day in the world. So we had no idea. And it's so sad that Ron's not here to see the result of all his work. He was a man of vision. He was the cleverest man I've ever met in my life. He was a genius. If he had an education, he would probably be on Mars right now. But fortunately for all of us, he was underwater.
One of the things that is incredibly compelling is the idea that you and Ron were working alone, essentially. I mean, you show us the Jean-Jacques Cousteau. I grew up on watching the Calypso, weekly, and you were the two of you with this little metal boat, and Ron was making all the housings for the camera. He kind of designed some of the gear. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yes, we had no money. Ron made all his camera housings long before he could buy them. They were commercially available. And that was something that really put us ahead. He designed a 35mm housing for a 35mm camera called a Camaflex. And that was used for Jaws. And that Jaws really put Ron into Hollywood. Not so much me, but especially Ron. And he didn't have any opposition. The only cameras that could be used in a housing were, I can't remember the name, big long name, and they were very big metal housings and you couldn't move very fast underwater with them. Ron designed a housing where you could swim fast. It just put us ahead of the game. But at the time, we didn't think that. We were just trying to make a living, trying to record the amazing marine world that existed then. I'm not saying it's not still amazing. A child today can go in the ocean with a face mask and think it's marvelous. I go in with a face mask and think it's sad because I know how rich and wonderful it used to be.
You were saying the other day that these days you like to dive in the equator?
Yes, I have arthritis. It's inherited, and I like to go and dive in warm water, and that's up near the equator. I can't get there now. It's the COVID's keeping me away.
Soon.
Oh, I hope.
Sally, what were the challenges of working with this archive? You had the wealth of these images that were collected since the 50s, I think.
That's right. Actually, the earliest footage that you see in the film was taken by Valerie's father, and it's old 16mm of Valerie in her teenage years post polio. So actually, the film extends over something like 7 decades when you add it all up, and literally thousands of hours. So the challenge primarily was volume. There's just so much of it. But the joy of it was in returning and revisiting that archive every time there was a sort of a new piece of information or another aspect to the story. So, for example, when I first saw the imagery shot in Blue Water White Death, the expedition where Valerie and Ron and Stan and Peter Gimble go off in search of the great white shark, but wind up in the middle of the Indian Ocean swimming cageless with oceanic white-tip sharks. The first time I saw that footage, I was transfixed because of how, for me, terrifying it was when they exit the cage and there are hundreds of these giant sharks, literally like some sort of, aeroplane or freighter swimming around them. And I was just gobsmacked, genuinely, like, audible gasp. But actually it was in speaking with other divers that we interviewed for the film, and indeed speaking with Valerie, when I actually discovered that footage is unable to be recorded today because there aren't those numbers of sharks around. That footage just suddenly gains in poignancy and historic record. So I think the challenges of the archive became swiftly, they kind of paled in comparison to both the richness of what had been recorded and also the layers in Valerie's own life. So I really loved finding metaphoric imagery to illustrate some of the biographical aspects, things like those beautiful fish, the luminescent fish around the time when we deal with Ron's death. I find that very poignant because it's more than just the literal image, it's conveying something emotional as well.
I think we have a question here. Speak with the mic.
Did you name any of the sharks you met?
Did you hear the question? Did you name any of the sharks you met?
Oh, yes. I had a special shark. Her name was Nursey, and she became my friend over a period of 3 days. On the third day, I just hang on to a fin and off we'd go around the reef. We were working with the American Navy on shark repellers. And Nursey was a tawny shark, not known for attacking people, but she was very big and she kept getting in the way of the experiments. So the Americans suggested we get rid of her. They didn't say how. Ron told me to get a bunch of fish, offer it to Nursey and swim like mad and walk away, which I did. And she followed. And I buried it under some dead coral, the fish. I swam back to the filming area and she was there before me. So Ron sort of looked cross and waved his arms at me, and off I went again with a bigger bunch of fish. I swam like mad. I went a long way and I stuffed it into a crack in the coral and covered it with dead coral, swam back. 10 minutes later, there she was. So I pretty much gave up. And we became friends. I would get into the water. We only worked there for 3 days. I'd get into the water with a bunch of fish, gather up Nursey, and she knew to follow me. So I'd swim off and she'd follow me, and we'd go somewhere nice in the reef, and I would just hide a little piece of fish and watch her dig it out, then hide another piece. And I kept her away from the experiments and the area that was supposed to be only dangerous or potentially dangerous sharks. And we became friends. And that's when I started to ride around. And I have received so much criticism for riding that shark. What people don't understand, by now, we're buddies. She's my friend. She'd take me anywhere if I had a fish in my side of a wetsuit for her. It's just that the average person, even in the diving world, basically doesn't understand that all the fish have a counterpart on land, including the sharks. And she was just like a nice, friendly deer or something. And I only knew for 3 days. I know that later on a finning vessel went out there and caught all those sharks, including Nursey, and she's gone. I just wish other people could have that sort of experience, have the opportunity to have it. I don't think it's going to happen again. Those sharks are gone.
We have another question here.
Do you have a favorite type of shark?
Do you have a favorite type of shark?
The grey nurse. In America, it's called the sandbar tiger. It has a terrible reputation because its teeth show, but it's never attacked anybody in the history of the planet. If it does attack someone, it's because it's got a spear through it and wants to get away. I had them protected here in Australia, totally protected, and it became the first shark in the world to ever be protected. And I'm very proud of that, because today there would have been no grey nurse off the coast. Fishermen, and spear fishermen in particular, would go out and powerhead them and bring them into the beach and say, aren't I brave? Look me, I'm a big man. I've just killed all these sharks. And give me the horrors. So there's plenty to see. If children go and swim with them, they're very big and they're very, very peaceful.
I think we have a question there.
Do you tag the sharks? In 1998, I was swimming with wild dolphins, and I had a dolphin encounter with a dolphin that had been tagged, and they knew her well. Her name was Top Notch, and I was petting her, and I saw you petting the shark, and I got yelled at for petting the dolphin because they don't want them to become friendly to humans, because then they could be captured and sold to SeaWorld. But she was a tagged shark, and they knew her because the shark, she was a tagged dolphin, and the shark had bitten her dorsal fin, so she had a notch, and her name was Top Notch. So did you know the sharks over time, and were they tagged?
Did you know sharks that had been tagged? The one that was released.
Yeah,
or
you know, the
you
one that
released?
Oh,
you put a
yes.
tag in. Yeah.
I have bought tags for sharks that need to be protected, and so where they go can be followed. But as far as the great white at that time goes, it was the first one to ever be tagged. Ron made the tag, but it was an American scientist, Dr. Gruber, who sent us the thermometer to take the temperature of the shark. We tagged it, we took its temperature and discovered that it was warm-blooded. It was always considered to be cold-blooded. It was warm-blooded. And I think science has gone on from there as far as sharks are concerned. And that was an American idea.
This is the shark that is caught in the trace wire that you see in the film that Ron and Valerie release out to sea. The homemade tag was one that they put on that shark at that time, which was in the very early 70s, wasn't it?
It was in the, yes, sometime in the 70s. I have to look at my diaries. But I don't think anybody's done that since. But I know in America, at the Farallons, they are having a big white shark tagging program, but I don't know how well it's going along. They don't ever get to know the shark personally.
No, and there's big tagging programs up and down the coast of Australia and New Zealand in terms of tracing those shark migrations,
Yes.
which we know still
And
very
movements.
little about.
Yeah, especially the tiger sharks at the moment.
Oh, the tiger shark, lovely.
You have another question there?
Do we know if sharks communicate with each other? Either
If sharks communicate with each other.
ocean?
Absolutely, they do. And they do it very quickly. I trained a shark to perform a simple trick for my camera. And I fed it a piece of fish when it did the trick perfectly. And I hit it on the nose with the handle of my knife when it didn't do it right. When I went back to shoot the shots that had been trained to do, it had two friends with us who tried to do the same thing. They obviously talked to each other.
I think we have a question there.
Valerie, thanks for your amazing love for the planet and what you've done to protect things. And Sally and Bettina, thanks for bringing this to all of us. Special thanks to Jackie LaFaro for bringing it here to Sag Harbor Cinema. Thank you all. And Valerie, I have a special question for you. That is, what should we do as activists now? What's our next step in helping with this progress? And how do we tell the difference between a male and a female shark?
Oh, no. Are you serious? Well, all the men in the audience will cringe, but a male shark has two penises and they're both very obvious. And a female shark is like a female anything. It doesn't have any penises. That's how you can tell the difference straight away.
Oh, they're external, yeah.
And they're
The mates,
external, like
yeah.
flapping around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that the other part of the question was, what do we need to do, ourselves in the audience to participate to the kind of conservationist work you do?
You're asking someone who has spent her life trying to protect the marine environment and the animals that live there. And all that time has just gone backwards. It's greed and apathy, greed by the fishermen and the other people who want to take animals out of the sea for either for pleasure, I'm saying, sports fishermen, or food. And it's apathy by the governments who just don't care. We're going to destroy the planet that supports us. There's no doubt about that. We're well on the way. And once we have done this, I don't think we'll ever be able to reverse the problem. The only thing that can happen to save the marine animals, and I'm saying not just the so-called cold-blooded ones, but the warm-blooded ones like the dolphin and the whale, is to leave it alone. Nature takes care of her own. Let nature handle it, because we, the human race, cannot.
There is one of the very moving things in the documentary is how your change of heart, it kind of comes from the inside, kind of from the experience. Nobody told you it's wrong to kill a shark. You just sort of, you and Ron, it just grew from the inside. And I like that Sally is calling you an accidental conservationist. Do you like the definition? And Sally, can you talk a little bit about this?
I think that one of the truths in the film, if you will, is what you've just said, which is that change comes from when you yourself emotionally are changed. And so in a funny kind of way, we all have the potential to transform our thinking, and it often takes place when we have had a personal epiphany. So I think the term accidental is only in reference to the fact that when Valerie first put on a face mask and then became a lethal and very successful top spearfishing champion, conservation was the furthest thing from her mind, not because she didn't want to do it, but because she didn't even know to do it. And so the accidental part is in relation to having that personal epiphany that then does transform your way of thinking. And we're very familiar with the idea of conservation or environmentalism today. These words weren't even in existence at the time that this transformation for Valerie personally happened, let alone the actions that they represent.
And I think we have one more question here.
When was the last time you have dived?
When was the last time you have dived?
Was that with us in Fiji?
No, that was at Fish Rock.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
With, shall I say his name?
I think you're allowed to say his name. I think the audience might be quite thrilled about his name.
I went diving at Fish Rock with grey nurse sharks and Chris
Hemsworth.
Oh,
Chris
dear.
Hemsworth. You mean Thor? You've been diving with Thor?
I love the way Valerie announces, I went diving with the grey nurse sharks, and by the way, with Chris Hemsworth.
No, he's wonderful. He's fabulous. He's a terrific guy.
Yeah, he's very
Yeah,
sweet.
he's very the best.
I think we have time for one more, and I'll take it if nobody else raises their hand. Valerie, what do you think still brings you to the sea, and what do you think is about the sea that called you in the first place?
We first started filming underwater because Ron and I needed to make a living. And in those days, there was no television, but we could sell our 16mm black and white film to Movietone News, and they would load up to 35 and put it in their little theatres all around the world. Times changed, and we started filming in colour, and it was just a means to make an exciting living. We both loved adventure. And then we started to understand the environment we were working with, because it was constant. We swam the length of the Great Barrier Reef, over 2,000 kilometres on scuba. It took 6 months, 2 days. We were sponsored by the University of Liège in Belgium. And we learned a great deal on that great long swim. We understood a great deal more about the marine world and who lived where and who could live with somebody or perhaps want to eat somebody. By the time we had finished, and I'd say this to this day, I probably know more about the Great Barrier Reef than anybody else in the world, because nobody ever had that opportunity. That's history. But the footage we shot, 35mm all the way, is in the University of Liège. It's there.
Well, I want to thank you for being here tonight. I'm going to try a trick, if the computer doesn't fail me, and show you that we have an audience for an applause before you leave us. And here's our socially distant audience.
Thank them all very much for coming and your wonderful questions, and it means a lot to us that people are seeing the film in an audience with other humans, and so it becomes a shared experience. We really appreciate it.
Oh, it was a gift to have the film and to have you. So you have a good day. It's night here, it's morning there. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.